This is your weekly briefing from Appraiser eLearning. I'm Hal Humphreys, your host, coming to you live from the Appraiser eLearning World Headquarters right here in Nashville, Tennessee. Got a little bit of sad news for you today. The appraisal industry lost a giant this month. Mr. George Harrison passed away earlier this month, and in a way to try and share with the world what an amazing guy George was, I've asked my business partner, Bryan Reynolds, and Teresa Walker, the administrator of the National Association of Appraisers, to join us. George Harrison, for those of you who don't know, was a founding member of the National Association of Appraisers. He founded the Columbia Institute. This man had a massive impact on a lot of appraisers' lives. If you ever took a course from the the Columbia Institute, George had an impact on your life. If you have been a member of the National Association of Appraisers, George had an impact on your life. If you did any kind of education in the appraiser world, there's a really good chance George had an impact on your life. So right now I'm going to bring in Bryan Reynolds and Teresa Walker. Bryan, thank you for being here. Teresa, thank you for being here. Bryan, I'm going to let you lead this because you knew George better than I did.
Yeah, George was just a one-of-a-kind character. I think that's fair to say. And Teresa can do a deeper dive because she worked with George every day when she was with the Columbia Institute. And the thing about George, he really encouraged the best out of all of us. I think that's a very fair statement. You know, George gave me my start really in teaching. There was another George that I taught for locally in Kentucky. And but once I got my USPAP credential, George and I had a conversation, and he kind of brought me into the fold and encouraged me to teach. And then George continued that encouragement all along the way. I mean, I remember George came up to me one day and he said, "Bryan, how many folks do you think you reach in a given year? How many appraisers do you get to communicate?" And I said, "George, I don't know. Thanks to you, probably several hundred. Maybe 1,000 or so." He said, "Why don't you write an article?" I said, "George, I'm not a writer. I'm a talker." But he encouraged me. He said, "You know, this publication has a distribution list of 40,000 appraisers. This one has 70,000. Write an article." And so I did. He encouraged me all along the way. And that's what Mr. Harrison did. We're going to miss Doc for sure.
Yeah, and like I said, I didn't know George that well, but I met him several times. And the one thing that struck me every time I met him, he was a tall man. He had this kind of regal appearance, had that shock of white hair. And when he shook your hand, he focused on you and made you feel like the world was revolving around you. Teresa, do you mind to share some memories about George Harrison with us?
It's funny because George remembers me before I remember him. He always tells everybody he met me at Valuation 2000 in Las Vegas, and I don't remember him at all. I moved to San Antonio shortly, right before 9/11, and met George right after that. Ended up working with him from 2004 to 2018. It was just a family environment at Columbia Institute. It was a small staff, and we did big things. Training people all over the country. And it was a family atmosphere. I got a text message from his daughter this weekend, and she said, "Can you please pass the word about him? Because I know how close you all were." I have some of the last pictures of George and I that I'm going to post on Facebook today. Last week was bittersweet. I was taking my grandchildren on their first cruise and got the word right before we set sail. And I said, "You know what? George would want me to really enjoy this vacation anyway." And I did that. So here I am back on Monday morning with the reality of all of this again. We had so much fun creating NAA, creating the summit, doing all the just having a good time and educating appraisers. I've talked to a couple people since I got back, and they said the one thing that they remember is George knew so much and he wanted to share it all with people. He didn't want to keep anything to himself. He wanted everybody to know. I remember when the new forms came out and he created that class right away because he wanted everybody to know everything that was going on and all the changes. And he made me work like crap to get that out. But as I said, it was a fun environment. He will be missed. Um, and that's, and I'm trying to get the word out this morning about his passing.
Teresa, thank you for that. You know, one of the things that I bear a personal sense of gratitude to George for is, you know, he made the introduction with Appraiser eLearning and the NAA and the Appraisal Summit. He was very welcoming to us as exhibitors at the Appraisal Summit. And now, since Columbia Institute is no longer, we get to co-host the summit with the National Association of Appraisers. And that is just, the amount of gratitude I have for George specifically for that is pretty strong. And again, you know, if you're an appraiser and you've been in this business for anything over 5 years, there's a really good chance George Harrison had an impact on your life. Teresa, thank you for sharing that story. Bryan, any final words?
You know, I'll just say this. I was in the woods in my deer blind, and Teresa tried to call me, and I thought, what in the world is she calling me for? She's on vacation. In fact, I believe she said, "Don't call me at all this week because I'm on vacation. I'm not working." And she tried to call me. I was a little surprised by that, and I immediately sent her a text and I said, "I'm in the woods. I'm hunting. I can't talk." And she responded via text to let me know of his passing. And I think we all, you know, kind of get a little shocked or surprised when we hear someone we love or care about has passed, and that certainly hit me in that regard. I was a little shocked and saddened, obviously. And then the emails started coming in from some of the prior instructors, and so many good words and stories. And I think I'm going to have a podcast on this, and maybe if I can have a couple of instructors on, I'll do that because there's so many stories that we could tell about Dr. Harrison. And I told Bobby, because he sent me the arrangements, and I haven't told anyone else. Teresa doesn't even know, but Teresa, I'm flying down for the services. I'm on a flight tomorrow morning, and so I'll probably see you tomorrow evening, and certainly the following day for the final services. So can't say enough good things about Dr. Harrison. He has opened the door of opportunity for many of us in the appraisal education space. So thank you, Hal, for having this tribute to him.
Sure thing. Teresa, Bryan, thank you guys so much for taking the time this morning to share some stories about George Harrison. That is your weekly briefing from Appraiser eLearning. I'm Hal Humphreys, your host. And again, I think this is a reminder, the stories we've heard about Dr. Harrison, he was generous, he was giving, he would help other people and encourage other people. That's one of the things that I think is really important that we do in this business. Encourage other appraisers to be better, to be stronger, to be smarter about the work they do. That's one of the reasons I'm proud to be a member of the National Association of Appraisers. That relationship for me started off as one of a business relationship between Appraiser eLearning and the National Association of Appraisers. It has worked out to be a really good thing for me personally. And again, George Harrison was a founding member of the National Association of Appraisers. If you're not a member of the National Association of Appraisers, I encourage you to take the time, go over to the NAA website and sign up. If your state doesn't have a coalition, I encourage you to form a coalition. Those are the kind of legacy items that I think will really pay tribute to George Harrison. Again, I'm Hal Humphreys. That's your weekly briefing from Appraiser eLearning.